Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our last lecture series, which is just going to be fabulous, about our North Beach Volunteer Fire Department. I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear it. Before we get started, I have a little bit of housekeeping. Please turn off your cell phones. Everything is being recorded. It's being streamed. It's YouTubed. So if you whisper to your neighbor, it's picked up. So just try not to make any noise if possible, because it gives us a better, more pure recording. I really want to thank Mickey Hummel to my right, Kevin Schmidt in the back, for all this wonderful technology. And we don't have to do anything because they do it all. And believe me, that is a real blessing for anybody who's challenged with technology. Now, I want to talk about, I need to introduce some elected officials who are here. Commissioner Grazzo. We have former Commissioner Pat Irish, former Town Council Mayor Pat Irish Mahoney. Former Larry Jaworski. But the most important thing I want to introduce today is we actually have people attending today who are so significant in our fire department. So wait until I say the names, and then really they deserve a big clap, because we have one of the few all-volunteer fire departments left. So special thanks to Smokey Ward for being here. Special thanks, that's okay. Special thanks to Eddie Humphreys, Charlie Gott, Larry Jaworski, and Suzanne Littlestar. And if I missed somebody else from the fire department, I apologize, but I think we have everyone. I can't say enough good things about the fire department, and the fact that we're going to have a 100-year anniversary in August of this year speaks volumes. They just do an amazing job day after day, year after year. So now it's a pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who is John Tippett. He's a native Washingtonian whose great-grandparents, aunts and uncles, always traveled down to Chesapeake Beach and North Beach. They wanted to escape the sweltering hot summer days of Washington. John actually grew up in Rockville and remembers making trips to the Twin Beach areas as a kid. He started his fire service career in 1974 as a junior firefighter with the Kensington Volunteer Fire Department in Montgomery County. In 1976, he was hired by Kensington, and he was actually one of the first 18-year-olds to ever be hired. That stroke of luck continued for another 33 years with a wonderful memorial and rewarding career. John retired from the Montgomery County Fire Department in 2009 as a battalion chief. His fire service didn't end when he retired from Montgomery County. He went on to accept a deputy chief's position with the Charlestown, South Carolina, Fire Department, where he spent 8.5 years in Charleston, and the final year he was the interim fire chief. John and his wife Amy relocated back to Maryland in 2018 for a position with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation as director of the fire service programs. They found their forever home here in North Beach, where they reside today. And in 2019, John joined the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department, where he still actively serves today. So welcome, John Tippett.
Thanks very much. You really don't know how hard it was to stand there that long and not be able to move around. So it is a real honor and a pleasure to be here today, representing the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department. Been a proud member there for almost 7 years now. And today, we're going to talk about maybe some things you didn't know about North Beach and its fire department or fire departments in the Twin Beaches. So first of all, I want to say thanks to the Bayside History Museum, the Calvert Libraries, and also the John Hanson chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution for sponsoring this talk today. And I hope by the time we finish, you'll have a renewed interest in what's going on in the beaches and a deeper appreciation for the people that are serving you in your time of need. So how did we get here? How did we get here? This gentleman, Otto Mears, is the guy that we need to thank for establishing Chesapeake Beach, which gave rise to North Beach, and provided us with the landing or the start of the two communities. So Otto Mears was a railroad executive, a railroad builder from out in Colorado. He was very successful out there. He built railroads that are still in use today. He was mainly interested in the narrow gauge railroad, if you're a railroad fan. But he came to Washington looking for something new and different to do. And he had this vision that he wanted to create a resort for the wealthy initially. And he wanted to call it the American Monte Carlo. That's what he had in mind. He wanted to create this grand place where people of wealth could come, get away from DC's heat, and then they could also enjoy themselves. So he convinced some wealthy people to go in with him. He built the railroad, obviously, which was the main thing, was trying to get from DC to the shore. And he built the railroad, which we can visit today at the Chesapeake Bay Railway Museum, because that railway station was the very place, was the terminus of the railroad. So Mears builds it. He finds his perfect spot. 1899, he builds the railroad. The playground starts to be built, and it evolves, but it doesn't quite get to where he wanted it to be. However, he created quite the feat. He built a resort out over the water. It was a 1,600-foot long wooden boardwalk. And all along that boardwalk were all kinds of rides, amusements, attractions. And on the shore, there was a huge dance hall that provided people with places they could dine, have a casino. Excuse me. He envisioned horse racing, but he ran afoul of the Maryland Horse Racing Group, who was not really interested in this outsider coming in and invading their territory. But nonetheless, he continued on with his efforts. There was a 1-mile pier that went out over the steamship, went out over the bay, so the steamships could come from Baltimore, Washington, and drop off more people. So the resort never quite actually materialized in the way he wanted it. But people of middle class and people that were just regular working people found that it was a good place for them to come. They wanted to be there. Now, if you think about it, if you look at this, this is a Sanborn insurance map, and one of the things the Sanborn insurance maps did was map out fire hazards. Everything in yellow is wood. And if you've lived here for more than about 7 days, you know wood and wind don't make great combinations for things. So picture that structure, that complex, out over the water, all wood, wind blowing through it all the time. Now, they were very thoughtful. They did have a fire department in Chesapeake Beach. And that's part of what the research, I'm working on the centennial history of the fire department. What I've discovered is that there were actually 2 fire departments in the Twin Beaches. Chesapeake Beach had its own fire department, and so did North Beach, before the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department we know today was formed. This fire department was a 1-station event behind a store with 1 vehicle, 1 fire extinguisher. But what I want to go back to is 1,600 feet of wood and all wooden structures, except for this one tiny little red oven there. That was made out of brick. Everything else was wood and 1 fire extinguisher to address all the fire problems there. In 1923, this is the map, this is the Sanborn legend there. There were only 200 people in Chesapeake Beach. However, 25 of those people were members of the Volunteer Fire Department of Chesapeake Beach. And if you see here, they're very detailed in that Chesapeake Beach had 1 chemical tank of 20 gallons. So I look to my fire department friends here, and you think 20 gallons of fire extinguishing agent for 1,600 feet of wooden pier and wooden structures, except for 1 brick oven and a mile-long pier. In addition to that, they had 300 feet of 2.5-inch hose on a cart that you would pull by hand, so you could get up and down the boardwalk. And then there were no fire alarms. So we have fire protection, we have firefighters, but we have no way of telling you when there's a fire, except for somebody yelling, fire or seeing the smoke. Chesapeake Beach itself, the streets were not paved, but they did have public lights, electric lights. So it was this vision of Otto Mears that kept getting to the top and then falling off. He would get money, and then he would go bankrupt. And it just, the amusement park just kept going and going and going. So this is what the fire protection looked like. There was one hand-drawn chemical extinguisher. So there are two different versions of the extinguisher, and trying to figure out which one they had in North Beach and Chesapeake Beach is a little bit difficult so far, but it's one of the rabbit holes that my wife will tell you keeps me up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to try to find the actual picture. But these are two renditions, two different types. And then the bucket brigade was the other part of the Chesapeake Beach Volunteer Fire Department. So this is a simulation of a bucket brigade. And as you can see, incredibly efficient and remarkable in its efforts to put fire out. And I'll go back to the fact that there was 1,600 feet of wooden pier, all wooden buildings, and a ton of buckets. They did buy buckets. They had a ton of buckets in the Chesapeake Beach Volunteer Fire Department, which is the precursor. So picture yourself as part of the bucket brigade. So just a close-up of one of the extinguishers. This is a typical 20-gallon hand-pulled chemical extinguisher. So you would fill it to a certain level with water, approximately 20 gallons of water. You would put 20 pounds of sodium bicarbonate in it. Then in a bottle, you would put 6 pounds of sulfuric acid, which would ride at the top of the extinguisher here in a holder with a small rubber stopper in it. And then what you would do is you would turn, when you wanted to put the extinguisher in service, you'd tilt it over. The stopper falls out of the bottle. The acid mixes with the sodium bicarbonate water, creates pressure, which would come out of this hose, 25 feet long, and squirt out of that nozzle. And you have a little device here to turn the nozzle on and off. These are one use only. So once you've expended your material, you could refill it and recharge it, but once you started it, it was kind of hard to stop because the chemical reaction keeps on going and keeps on going and keeps on going. So one of the drawbacks of these extinguishers, obviously, is if you shut it off while it's still building pressure, eventually it gets kind of tired of holding the pressure and it can explode. So ideally, you use all the extinguishing agent. So let's flash forward here. No pun intended on flash there. To April 21st, 1910. There was a huge casino. You saw the drawing there. And on April 21st, 1910, the casino catches on fire. The fire was discovered by the general manager, who was notified by telephone. There were telephones, but there wasn't really a great alarm system. And again, you'll note the size of the casino and the size of the fire department and the fact that there was one 20-gallon chemical fire extinguisher to put the fire out. Didn't end very well. So the casino burns to the ground. But as you can see there, they're pretty inventive people and they're pretty energetic because they promised that they would have it rebuilt by May 28th for the season opening, and they did. So they were pretty incredibly resourceful in their ability to get stuff done. The next fire that happens for the Chesapeake Beach Volunteer Fire Department is the Belvedere Hotel, which was originally supposed to be a club for the wealthy. It was supposed to be very opulent, supposed to have all kinds of decorations, all kinds of things that would attract the wealthy people to come. Well, they didn't show up. So they converted it to a hotel for the people of meager means. So the Belvedere Hotel catches on fire March 30th, and the volunteer bucket brigade of 100 men, but what they failed to mention here is that there's more than just 100 men involved here. Remember, there's only 25 members of the volunteer fire department. So once the building starts to burn, and this building sat right at the end of 17th Street, just over right on that hump there before you go down to what would have been the beach at the time. So $200,000 is what this place cost at the time when it burned in 1923. Now we are approaching ever closer to the creation of the actual North Beach Volunteer Fire Department that we know today. But these are all the precursors that sort of drive what's going to happen here. So the Bucket Brigade wages a long fight against the flames. They finally conquer them before the apparatus from Washington, D.C. arrives. So the telephone operator calls Annapolis, calls DC, and calls Marlboro, but that was a little bit later. And they send apparatus to help. DC Fire on the way has a wreck in Upper Marlboro and totals their hose cart, completely destroys their truck, and it has to be towed back. So that doesn't make it to the fire. That's the bad news. The good news is, in those days, the DC Fire Department engine companies were two pieces. So the hose cart wrecked, but the pumper got here. So the pumper was able to draw water from the bay and help fight the fire, what was left of the building that was on fire. They get a great credit in the paper. They're the Chesapeake Beach men who live in the community, and I keep saying men here, but there's going to be a nice little twist. They had an engine capable of pumping from the bay. Somehow, that's one of the rabbit holes, trying to figure out what this engine was, where it was, what happened to it, because they talk about it periodically in the paper, but there's no specific details about what's going on. But if you'll notice that as the bucket brigade was getting themselves together, and they couldn't get the pumper to work, they used the water spigots to fill the buckets to fight the fire. Here's our twist. For 3 hours, the bucket brigade lined up from the Belvedere Hotel at the end of 17th Street down to the bay and back, trading buckets, fighting the fire. So it's 100 men in the previous articles. I found this article that says women were also involved. The women were on the empty side, and the men were on the full side of the buckets. So the bucket would be thrown on the fire, or let's start from the beginning. The bucket is a chicken or egg. The bucket has to be dragged from the water. It's passed along all the way up the line, thrown on the fire, and then handed off to the person on the other side. And the women had the empties all the way down. And this is an interesting American tradition, because all across America, when bucket brigades were formed, the men handled the full buckets and the women handled the empties. It was a gentleman thing. So for 3 hours, they're shoving buckets or taking buckets out of the bay to put this and it was a 5-story building, all wood. And of course, it's a $50,000 loss in 1923. So now we have another fire in 1923, which is again sort of driving the need for a more advanced, well-equipped, better trained fire department. But these people are still doing the best they can. This one happens in August of 1923. So 1923 was a really bad year for Chesapeake Beach, for the amusement area. So in this fire, the dance pavilion, 100 feet of boardwalk, and 14 restaurants are burned in the event, which creates a huge disaster for the place. Shifting winds come into play, and for any of the members of North Beach can understand, wind always plays a major role in what's happening with us when it comes to fire. So at this time, a gasoline pump was pressed into service. Somehow they had a gasoline pump, but if you'll notice, the bucket brigades there again, visitors helped out. So everybody became part of the fire department when there was a fire. And the thousands of pleasure seekers that were there, for those that didn't get involved, they had the show of the week because they got to watch these people try to put this fire out as they were working on it. This was another article that I found in a New York Clipper. They had the loss at 10 times what was originally created in the paper. So they went from $15,000 to $150,000 in loss. I think it might have been a typographical error, but still a fair amount of fire. So the superintendent that was there, he's in charge of the firefighters, which kind of suggests that there was some firefighting force, but they didn't have a traditional fire department like we know today with a rank structure. Interestingly, 2 years before, a section of the boardwalk collapsed and injured over 100 people. So the amusement park had its pros and cons. If you were lucky enough to get there and get out of there with your life, you were doing okay. It was a good visit. So let's go beyond the boardwalk into Belvedere. Let's flash forward a little bit. This is a special thanks and a shout out to somebody who's become a good friend of mine in my research, Vincent Turner. These are two legends from other Sanborn maps. And the reason I point these out is that in 1930, you'll see that there's a Chesapeake Beach Volunteer Fire Department, still 25 men, 1 hose wagon. Now they have 500 feet of 2.5-inch hose. So they found some money and got some more hose. kept in front of the casino now, so they moved it from the bowling alley to the casino. And then now there's a fire department listed in North Beach with 75 men, 1 fomite child's pumper. We'll talk about that in a second. They still have the chemical tanks, which we'll talk about in just a second. But by 1938, if you'll notice, there's no more Chesapeake Beach Volunteer Fire Department. Everything's handled by North Beach. So from 1926, when the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department formally organizes, to 1930, there was still a volunteer fire department of some kind in Chesapeake Beach. So I'm dying to get into some records somewhere and find out the story. How did it go away? What happened to it? That brings us now to my favorite place, North Beach. Nothing against anybody from Chesapeake Beach, but I live in North Beach. So there were some land developers that saw what was happening in Chesapeake Beach, and there were also people that lived in this area that wanted to get away from all the noise and the confusion of Chesapeake Beach, and they decided to start a small community in North Beach, Maryland, about roughly a mile away from downtown Chesapeake Beach. Please take note of the prices. So for $1 down and $1 per month, you could have got a nice lot in North Beach. And for $5 down and $5 a month, you could have been on the waterfront. So for roughly $300, you could have a nice piece of property here. So as this community is forming, obviously, they see the need, because what do you think they're building their homes from? Wood. It's all wood. And what else is still happening in North Beach that's happening in Chesapeake Beach? The wind drives things out pretty dramatically. So the very first recorded fire that I could find in North Beach was the Dr. Daniel Burtwell's bungalow at the tail end of what is today, I want to say it's Atlantic Avenue, at the very end lot, and it was an arson fire. So Dr. Burtwell's cottage burns to the ground, obviously, and then a couple hours later they find the person that was in charge of the fire. But we do note that in 1910, it doesn't say much about what happened with the fire department there. So we don't really know exactly who came, but whoever did come, it was too late for them to do anything. And of course, these are small cottages that don't really have heat, don't have electricity. They're just for the summer operation, and they're maintained when people are there. We flash forward now to 1914, which is the next major recorded fire that I could find any record of. And this is in May of 1914, and it starts in the cottage of, it says F.W. Lupton there, who's a sea captain, but actually I think it's E.W. Lupton. And his fire starts on the third lot in from, if you're standing in the North Beach Boardwalk where the homes start out on Bay Avenue, it's the third lot in. Then, because of the wind, 6 more cottages burn to the ground before they're able to get the fire under control. Now, at this time, there are some volunteer firefighters of some sort in North Beach, which is kind of the earliest recorded mention that we have of North Beach having a fire department of some sort. Now, how were they summoned? Well, it was whoever the watchman was would just start yelling fire. And North Beach was a small enough community at the time that most people would hear it. And they'd be off to the races there. So the Luptons escaped with their night clothes and were cared by their neighbors, which is something that is not too far away from what happens today. The flames were fanned by an easterly wind, and that's what took the rest of the cottages out. And if it wasn't for the bucket brigade, they would have burned the whole row down. So they lucked out there. So now we talk about what is this North Beach Volunteer Fire Department? North Beach, or North Chesapeake Beach, actually. It doesn't become North Beach till 1910. So we have the North Chesapeake Beach Volunteers that are there. And we know there's some existence, or we know they're in existence, because we see from the town minutes, which were available in the Bayside History Museum, that there was moved and passed that a fire extinguisher in Town Hall be put in proper condition. So one of the recurring themes here is that fires were kind of rare, and fire extinguishers were kind of expensive. As you can see, it was $1.59 to charge that fire extinguisher, that they weren't always taken the best care of. This fire extinguisher was kept, it was one of the ones that I showed you earlier, one of those 20-gallon extinguishers. It sat right here on this site. This is where the very first firehouse was for the North Beach Volunteers. what we can figure out of the predecessor to the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department we know today was the Public Safety Committee of North Beach. It was 3 members appointed by the mayor, and their job was fire and police protection. They were heavily engaged in police protection. Crime was a big thing here, for a big concern, not a big thing, but a big concern. So there's a lot of things in the town minutes about crime, and not so much about fire until there is one. Then you get to see some action. There was an ordinance for boarding houses and hotels to have at least a sufficient number of fire extinguishers of not less than 2 gallons, and they would have been smaller versions of that big one that you saw. And if you were around in the 50s and the 60s, you probably saw those extinguishers in the hotels and buildings that you operated in or lived in. There was an ordinance to repair the fire extinguishers, excuse me. And then they talked about installing a fire alarm, and that was referred to the Public Safety Committee. Unfortunately, as you're reading through the minutes of these meetings, some things never come back around. So this is referred to the Public Safety Committee, but we never heard what the Public Safety Committee thought about the fire alarm. But more about that later. Every building in North Beach was to have a fire extinguisher of some sort, but not compulsory in a private residence. A person's home is their castle. It's one of the great struggles of American fire protection is that we can't enforce a lot of fire codes in people's private dwellings, which leads to a lot of fires in private dwellings. One of the things that I found interesting in 1921, they passed an ordinance. There was a $50 fine for anybody that used the fire apparatus for private use. I don't know what that was about, but I'm interested in kind of digging that up as well. Here's something interesting also in 1921. You can see back and forth now between the 2 communities. Fire was occurring, fire was happening. There was a fire at Sand Beach, and there was a city vote of thanks to the parties who assisted in the fire at Sand Beach. So it could have been a cottage, probably was a cottage, but I don't have too many details about that, except this suggests that there were firefighters and community involved in putting the fire out. So by 1921, and now we sort of have a tip of the hat to the ladies again, the men of the town were very happy with one 20-gallon fire extinguisher. The Ladies' Home Club of North Beach buys 2 more for the town. So now we have a total of 3 in the sprawling town of North Beach. In 1922, found some minutes from the North Beach Town Hall minutes that talk about the town appointing George Haller as fire chief with 3 deputy chiefs, 1 for each ward, or 1 in charge of each of the fire extinguishers that were posted. The North Chesapeake Beach Volunteer Fire Department, which is the true predecessor of the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department, in 1923, as you saw earlier, now has 50 people, 50 men, 3 of the 20-gallon fire extinguishers, thanks to the Ladies' Club, each having 75 feet of hose. And we do have a fire alarm in North Beach now. It's a gong on a tree that was outside of this building. The tree's gone, don't know where the gong went. The gong was probably a large wagon wheel. Typically, that's how they were in the United States. Here we see some other word here. Chief Haller was paying now $12.50 for the fire engine chemicals, which suggests that if he's paying for chemicals to recharge the extinguisher, it was used somewhere. So it's just kind of lost to history. There were 3 fire stations, 1 here at Town Hall. The second one was on lot 109 on Erie Street between 1st and 2nd. The third one is north of 3rd Street, and I know it's on a map somewhere, but I just haven't been able to find it yet, but I will. And the interesting thing about the fire station number 2 is that the owner of that lot petitioned the city and complained and wanted the firehouse moved, which is also not an unusual event in America. Everybody loves having the firehouse as long as it's not right next door. So they're ready to go. The interesting thing about the fire station on the 3rd fire station is apparently it was not sitting on very good ground because they had to pick it up and move it to more solid ground. In 1924, Mr. McAllister, now this says I think it's Frank or Franco-American Fire Engine Company. I think that's American LaFrance. I couldn't find a Franco-American company, but American LaFrance was a major manufacturer back in the 20s, all the way up until 2014. And he approached the council about purchasing or buying a motor-driven fire apparatus for North Beach, for the North Chesapeake Beach Volunteers. This is lost to history. This is the only mention in the town. They refer to the Public Safety Committee, and it's never heard from again. Now, we flash forward to 1926, probably the part of the presentation you've already been waiting for. Calvin Hicks was from the American Insurance, or the State Fire Investigating Department of State Insurance. In 1926, he comes down here to look at a lumber fire that occurred in North Beach Park. He meets with Samuel Owings Road, and he meets with Jacob Delp, a local carpenter. And they meet with Mr. Hicks to go out and look at this fire. And in the course of the conversation, Mr. Hicks recommends to Owings and Delp that they should have a fire department, an organized or a better equipped fire department. So immediately following, this is a letter that Samuel Owings wrote to the North Beach Fire Department after it organized. He was resigning as the corresponding secretary because they already had a secretary. But he explains everything that occurred that triggers the creation of the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department that we know today. Lo and behold, after Mr. Hicks leaves, there's another fire, believe it or not. It's on a windy day in downtown North Beach, Maryland, right here at 3rd and Chesapeake. And what do you think the outcome is? Not great. Yeah. So this is the January 29, 1926 conflagration, which is really the true triggering factor that creates the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department we know today. Dakin Hardware, which was right here. Weed Grocery was next door to the left, I believe. And then there was a dwelling and a garage, and the Dakins lived over top of the hardware store. So the central portion of the town was threatened by the fire, by the wind. 200 people fight the fire. A bucket brigade, again, saves the day. They call DC Fire, who sends a truck. Engine Company 15 shows up. The citizen firefighters, as it talks about here, were confining the blaze to 2 stores. So think about that. 200 people and buckets kept the fire confined to 3 buildings in January. It's kind of chilly here in January, so it's quite an outfit. This is an example of the type of fire truck that would have been coming down from DC over roads in 1926. The other thing that's interesting about that is the people that were assembled to fight the fire were called by the Prince Frederick telephone operator. She made over 100 telephone calls to tell people to come to North Beach to fight the fire. You have the time of your life. So kudos to her. So as a result of that fire, Owings, Delp, and a whole host of other luminaries from the town of North Beach at the time get together at a location, at Town Hall, 38 men and 1 woman, and they decide to create the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department. Now, among the most cherished discoveries in this whole event here was that we actually found the original notes from the meeting and creation of the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department. That's a screenshot of the first page. Meeting call to order 8:30 p.m. They could probably still smell the smoke from the buildings that were burned as they met here in their former town hall. And these people decide to create the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department, which is interesting because there actually had been a fire department and they just decided they needed to do something better and more organized. So 35 people signed as active, 4 signed as associate, and then 1 woman signed on as passive. That was Mrs. Sanders, who's the president's wife. And from there, we begin to know the North Beach Fire Department that we have today. So I took a 6-year snapshot of February of 1926 to February of 1932 to just sort of give you some insight into the very beginnings of how the department got off the ground. So you had to be a resident to be an active member, which is kind of interesting. Because in the early roles of the department, we have all of these applications that are addressed of people that live in Northwest, Southwest, Southeast DC. So you could be an associate member of the fire department because they collected your $5 in dues. But to be an active member, you had to live in the town. So they recruited members. Here's a screenshot of our earliest application. It's from August 3rd, 1928. It's from William Fortier. He had to be sponsored by Willard S. Ward, who was Smokey's grandfather, right? And first fire chief of the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department, and kind of a legend. And he was on the committee, the membership committee was Willard Ward, B.L. Deutsch, and Robert Wicks. So once somebody recommended you for the fire department, this committee would vet you, and then you would be voted in. So it wasn't like everybody just walked in the door and became a member as part of the organization. So once we have a fire department, I take it back, dues were only $3 in 1928. Sorry about that. Active members also had to pay 25 cents every month to remain a member. So you had to put the money where your mouth was. The next thing they had to do was purchase some land. So again, out of the books that we found, there were lots offered for sale by different members. So Mrs. Dora West was the winner of the land purchase, although some others had tried to get their land purchased, and I don't know if it was because their land wasn't worth as much or what the deal was. But anyway, Mrs. West had a lot at 4th and Dayton, and that's where the old firehouse and today's Bayside History Museum sits. So that's where they built the station. So then they had to do fundraising, obviously, so they could build all the firehouse by fire trucks. The first thing they did was do a tag day where you would buy a subscription to the fire department and you get a small tag that showed you were a supporting member. Now, if you wanted to pay extra money, you could get a tag large enough to put on your car. But if you didn't, you just got one to wear on your coat. This letter was a solicitation letter that went out for the purchase of an up-to-minute triple combination pumper that was the second piece of fire apparatus that the town bought, or the fire department bought. And it talks about how each member, active and honorary, under the Constitution and bylaws, must pay fixed sums of dues, which help support the department. So they asked the men and women of the towns, so this went out to Chesapeake Beach as well, to become an honorary member. So if you donated, you got on the rolls. You didn't have to ride a fire truck, although there are later elements that we'll talk about in a different presentation that talk about they had to pass a rule that said you can only put active members on the fire truck, because what was happening was when the fire department would go out on a call, people would jump on the truck as it was going down the street. So you'd have 25 or 30 people hanging off of a fire truck. So the great difference between the two fire departments early and the North Beach Fire Department we know today is that the North Beach Fire Department we know today incorporated and got a charter through the state. And that took place July 30th, 1926 is when this was signed, but we recognize August as the date. So it must have been from the time they got from DC back out here, had a meeting and said, we can all do this. The official date of the fire department is August 1926. Then they purchased fire trucks. And then it's kind of incredible to think, because these trucks were probably somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 or $16,000 back in the day. So in a very short period of time, because the truck you see at the top is the very first truck, which was purchased in 1926. This was purchased in 1932. So in 6 years, they raised enough money to buy two pieces of modern fire apparatus. And interestingly, the first truck they bought was a Fomite Child's chemical truck. So it had two large chemical tanks that operated the same way as the large extinguisher that we talked about earlier, along with hose and fire extinguishers on the side. Recharging systems are here. And this was the actual truck, but in between the time that this truck was ordered and delivered, Fomite Childs loaned North Beach a fire truck. And through the generosity of the Ward family, we have a picture of that truck out in front of this very space with the fire alarm system that we're very honored to have. This piece of apparatus, the 1932 Seagrave, was considered state-of-the-art at the time, a 600-gallon per minute pump. Didn't carry any water, but if you notice on the side, there are still fire buckets. So even though we have modern motorized fire equipment, we still need buckets to get to do things. Cisterns were dug so that there was a water supply. There were no hydrants in North Beach. So Smokey's grandfather was a well driller, and he installed 7 cisterns around North Beach to provide water for firefighting. One of those cisterns, we know where all those cisterns are located, or were located, and one of those cisterns is actually still sitting under the Bayside History Museum. Our cadets are going to go out there one day and kind of dig out the opening to it and make something out of it. But that's kind of a rendition of what a cistern would look like. It would capture rainwater, and then it would serve as the place for firefighting water if you couldn't get to the bay. A firehouse was built, and again, much of this was done with volunteer labor. A number of the members were carpenters, electricians, plumbers by trade, so they would get materials donated to them, or they would actually buy materials from the purchase and be able to do the great building that they put up. Smokey, you probably spent some time there in that building? Spent some time in this building? Yep. Charles Gott in the back of the room. These are two of our oldest living members of our department, still considered, and Eddie Humphreys, 3, sitting here, who all spent time in that building. I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to have them provide for us in the future here. They installed sirens. So we've gone beyond the gong now. Sirens were located strategically throughout the area. If you go back here, there's one siren here that was actually on the firehouse. There was another siren in North Beach Park. There was another siren that was up on 260 where the antique store is. And each of those sirens would be activated, and that would tell you where the fire was. And then last but not least, North Beach Volunteer Fire Department was the first organized chartered fire department in Calvert County, and its response area was roughly Annapolis to Solomon's Island with 2 trucks. So, and there's all kinds of great stories about being called to Solomon's, and they get there just in time to water down the embers, but thanks for coming. I can't imagine how long it took to get there. So that kind of wraps up our presentation for today. I want to special shout out to Grace Mary Brady and Vincent Turner, and also Krista Grace from Chesapeake Beach Railway Museum for their help in putting this together. Bring to your attention that on August 6, 2026, you're going to hear more about the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department. So from where we stop today forward will be the purpose of our next presentation, and give you some more insight and desire on what we'll do there. On August 8th, please mark your calendars. There's going to be a parade, open house, and apparatus muster. Parade will be through town, and we'll end up at the firehouse. In Hardesty Hall, we'll have demonstrations and items that will be on display. We have a night at the museum, at both museums planned for during the week. We haven't nailed down those evenings yet, but we'll have fire department representatives there, and the museums will have their items of their collections on display. And August 18th to 23rd, we're going to have an old-fashioned carnival, which was a huge fundraiser for the department for decades. We're going to have it on the grounds of the firehouse, so it'll be a small carnival, but still, it'll be appropriate and fun. So just want to say thank you very much. I know we have a few minutes left to see if there's any questions from anybody. I can't thank you for giving your time on such a great day, and I hope you found this very informative. So thank you all. Yes, ma'am.
Have you been able to trace where all of the prior fire engines that were owned by, have you been able to trace where all the previous fire engines owned by the department have gone?
Some. We did, ironically, about 3 years ago, a gentleman from North Carolina contacted us and said, I think I have one of your trucks. So we kind of asked around, and people looked at it and said, nah, we never had a truck like that. And he says, it says NBVFD on the hood, very faded. So I looked around, there's only one NBVFD in America that I could find. And we checked with Smokey, checked with some other people, and said, oh no, that was one of our trucks. So Smokey's brother Wayne and I went down to North Carolina. We looked at it. It had been stored in a building for 20 or 30 some odd years. The building had collapsed onto it, so it kind of damaged it a little bit. But it was still fairly mechanically sound. So we purchased it at a very reasonable price, something way less than what a new fire truck costs today. And it's being restored. So Tommy Gilmartin from Tech One Auto is taking care of the mechanicals, and Mike Torres is doing all the body restoration work down at his shop down in Bushwood. We're very excited to say that the cab is back on the frame, and that's at Tommy's, getting its mechanicals done. And Mike is finishing up the body work. The body was kind of damaged. And ironically, this day and age, there aren't too many people left that know how to work on those types of vehicles. So Mike Torres happens to be an old-fashioned body and paint guy. None of his people know how to straighten the metal that's on that truck, but he does, thank goodness. And then Tommy is just an old gearhead who just knows old material. He found another 1947 fire engine to use as donor parts. So we're using that, we're gutting that truck to put in the truck that we have. And it'll be ready for the parade. May not be finished, but it'll be ready for the parade. So we're very excited about that. The 1932 Seagrave came back to North Beach, but it sat outside for so long it just kind of rotted away, which is, I'm kind of a Seagrave buff, so it kind of broke my heart. But we'll take the 47. We'll take the 47. Yeah, that makes it kind of hard. Yes, sir.
Firefighting, of course, is a dangerous profession, but what about the casualty rates or injury rates among the firefighters? Have there been any inflicted here?
Yes, we've had 2 line-of-duty deaths. Larry Cox died in April of 1970. He fell off the back of a truck that was on its way to a brush fire in Fairhaven. And then Pat Osborne, one of our EMS captains, died on a call. She was in the back treating a patient, and when they got to the hospital, she had died in the back of the unit. So those are the 2 line-of-duty deaths we've had here. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
How many volunteer firefighters do you have now?
We have a roster of about 125, and of that number, there are about 30 that are active, that are staffing the equipment. So, which is yes, ma'am, yeah, men and women. And that's about a ratio that is normal for the United States. It's about a 1/3 of the total roster. Now, people age out. I mean, people stay on the roster, but there are a lot more people on the rolls than actually run the calls. Yes.
You mentioned that we had only 25 people doing the bucket brigade at the Belvedere, but then the record showed 100. Where'd the other 75 go?
They were citizens.
Oh,
Yeah, the volunteers would come, and then from there, everybody else was just expected to pitch in. So they would grab people that were there. Of course, there's always a natural inclination to want to help, but then if there wasn't anybody that wanted to help, you've been deputized. If you want to get your stuff out of your hotel room, you better start throwing some water on the building.
In your archives of the first members from 1926, I noticed a name that possibly might be a family member of mine. Is there a place or someone I could go to find out more information about who that was?
Sure. Yeah, see me after the presentation.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
The sulfuric acid chemical, wouldn't that cause toxicity? I mean, wouldn't there fumes given off that would
Yeah,
have
but
been-
we're trying to put the fire out. No, you
Well,
are
thank you for
correct.
your service.
And that's why those things went out of vogue. It was the pressure and the poison. So sometimes the cure was worse than the disease. Anybody else?
It's not really fire related, but the story right after the Belvedere hotel slide talked about, it was the place that had $150,000 damage, and it said it started in the Japanese ball concession. What's a Japanese ball?
So they had, there were different stands on the pavilion, or actually in the resort, and they had different themes. So if you've been to Disney World and you saw the different worlds that are down there, countries, the best I can determine, it was like that. So there was a Japanese themed restaurant stand. There was, can't think of the others right off the top of my head right now, but yeah, it had the paper lamps and all those other kind of things. Completely non-flammable, no. So all kinds of contributing factors to the fire. So, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, ever since I've been in office, I've been trying to learn more about the fire departments, as you know. It was all new to me. I know that you all keep us safe, and we want to make sure you have what you need to keep yourselves and us safe. But the North Beach Volunteer Fire Department, bar none, your volunteerism, the impact that you have on the youth in Calvert County, I've just not seen anything like it. You all are doing a great job. And the history of volunteerism is alive and well in North Beach. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. I'd like all the members of North Beach Volunteer Fire Department that are here, please stand up, because we are standing on the shoulders of those great men. So Charles, Eddie, Smokey. Yeah. So Smokey was a deputy chief in the 1970s. Eddie's been a member since 1966. And Smokey. Eddie served on the board, has been an active member. Charles took a great interest in the equipment and the budget. So the reason we have the money we have today is because Charles always said no when people wanted to spend money. And he would repair those fire trucks on a wing and a prayer and kept them operating. So we're where we are today because of men like these. So, all right. Thank you all so much. Don't forget about August 6th, August 8th. And keep an eye on the website for other historical things that we're discovering and we're putting up for people's benefit. And stop by the firehouse, please. Be happy to see you and show you around. All right? Thank you all.
Awesome, thank you. I'll get you your